Welcome to Bedtime Lessons. Tonight we embark on a quiet journey into the very fabric of our daily existence. We will explore the subtle power of habits, why we do what we do, often without conscious thought, and perhaps along the way we might just uncover some gentle truths about ourselves. Imagine, if you will, the vast, intricate tapestry of your day. From the quiet ritual of your morning tea to the precise moment you settle down each evening, so many of these threads are woven by habit. Indeed, studies suggest that nearly half of our daily actions aren't conscious decisions at all. They are simply habits. They are the brain's elegant solution to conserve energy, to automate the routine, leaving our minds free for grander thoughts. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is a habit? Well, in the gentle lexicon of psychology, a habit is a well-learned behavior, an automatic sequence that becomes reflexive, often independent of our immediate motivation or even our conscious intent. Think of it as your brain creating a shortcut. When you perform a particular action repeatedly, especially in a consistent setting, your brain begins to link that situation directly with the action itself. It's a remarkable efficiency. This process is deeply rooted in our neurobiology. You see, when we repeat a behavior, specific pathways in our brain, particularly within the basal ganglia, a fascinating structure involved in motor control and procedural learning, become stronger. It's akin to forging a path through a dense forest. The more you walk it, the clearer and easier it becomes. And a key player in this neural reinforcement is dopamine, a neurochemical often associated with pleasure and reward. It tells your brain in its own subtle language that this action is worth remembering, worth repeating. But here's where a deeper understanding begins to unfold. Every habit, whether beneficial or otherwise, follows a predictable pattern, a kind of internal rhythm. We call it the habit loop. It consists of three essential components: a cue, a routine, and a reward. The cue is the trigger, the spark that initiates the behavior. The routine is the behavior itself, the action you take, and the reward, of course, is the positive outcome, the satisfaction that reinforces the loop. It's this delicate dance between cue, routine, and reward that slowly, almost imperceptibly, solidifies a behavior into a steadfast habit. Think of it this way: your brain doesn't inherently distinguish between a good habit and a bad one. It simply observes repetition and efficiency. If a behavior provides a reward, however fleeting, your brain endeavors to make that behavior easier to repeat next time. An automatic response to a familiar cue. It's a powerful mechanism, one that shapes so much of what we eventually become. The echoes of yesterday. Discussion last time about the unseen strings that guide so much of what we do brings us naturally to a deeper understanding of these fascinating mechanisms. You see, an astounding proportion of our daily lives, some researchers suggest as much as 45% or even 70%, is orchestrated not by conscious choice, but by these automatic routines we call habits. Now, the very word habit often carries a connotation of something perhaps mundane or even undesirable. Yet, from the perspective of our incredible brains, habits are nothing short of a marvel of efficiency. Imagine, if you will, the sheer mental energy required if you had to consciously decide every single action: how to tie your shoes, how to hold a cup, how to greet a familiar face. It would be utterly exhausting. Our brains, ever the astute architects of conservation, automate these repeated behaviors to reduce what we might call cognitive load. It's like having a dedicated assistant for repetitive tasks, freeing up your attention for more complex challenges. Indeed, the brain simply doesn't distinguish between what we label good habits and bad habits. It merely automates whatever behavior is consistently repeated. What truly underpins this automaticity is a remarkable neural process, often described as the habit loop. Think of it as a three-part dance, perpetually reenacted within the quiet confines of your mind. First, there's the cue, a signal that initiates the dance. This cue could be anything: the distinct aroma of morning coffee, the gentle vibration of your phone, or perhaps a particular time on the clock. It's the trigger, the silent summons to action. Next comes the routine itself. This is the behavior you perform in response to that cue. It might be brewing that coffee, checking your phone for messages, or perhaps embarking on your morning walk. At first, this routine might require some conscious effort, some dedicated thought, but with repetition it flows more smoothly, more effortlessly, until thoughts are scarcely needed. And finally, the reward. This is the positive outcome or the sense of satisfaction that follows the routine. It's the warm comfort of that coffee, the momentary distraction from a new notification, or the invigorating feeling after a brisk walk. This reward is crucial, for it signals to your brain that this particular sequence, cue, routine, reward, is worth remembering, worth repeating. It reinforces the loop, etching it deeper into your neural pathways, making it more likely that the next time that cue appears, the routine will follow with even greater ease. This continuous cycle, this elegant interplay of cue, routine, and reward, is the very substance from which our habits are woven. It helps us navigate the world with efficiency, allowing us to function without constantly reinventing how we interact with our environment. It's an ancient, evolved mechanism, quietly shaping our everyday, often without us even realizing it. Why we repeat. Indeed, the very concept of a habit is fascinating, isn't it? Our minds, in their infinite wisdom, seek efficiency above all else. They crave routine, a well-trodden path to conserve precious energy. And what does this lead to, you might wonder? Well, a significant portion of our daily existence, perhaps even half of it, is guided not by conscious deliberation, but by these automatic routines we call habits. Think of it as your brain creating a kind of mental shortcut. When you repeat an action in a consistent context, say brushing your teeth every morning after waking, your brain begins to link the cue waking up directly to the routine brushing. It's a neurological dance where the signal directly activates the behavior, bypassing the need for you to consciously decide, ah yes, now I must brush my teeth. This might seem trivial for something like dental hygiene, but this same elegant mechanism governs far more complex behaviors. What's particularly interesting is how our minds, in this pursuit of efficiency, don't necessarily distinguish between what we label good habits and bad ones. A habit in its purest form is simply a repeated behavior, an automatic response to a specific cue, often reinforced by a reward. The brain isn't making a moral judgment, it's merely optimizing for what you've consistently shown it to do. This explains why habits, once formed, can feel so incredibly enduring. They become deeply etched within the very structure of our minds. Now, you might be imagining a kind of physical groove in the brain, and in a way, that's not far from the truth. This process involves the brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself, something called neuroplasticity. Repeated actions actually strengthen the neural pathways associated with that habit. It's akin to carving a deeper and deeper channel in stone with each passing moment. The more you walk a path, the clearer and easier it becomes to traverse. This profound adaptability means that every time you perform a routine, you're quite literally reshaping your brain. It's truly a marvel. Brain's deepest grooves. Now, as we delve deeper into this intriguing landscape of habits, it becomes clear that these deeply ingrained patterns, these automatic routines, they are not merely behaviors we perform. No, they are in essence the brain's ingenious way of reducing its cognitive load, its immense burden of constant decision-making. Imagine, if you will, the vast machinery of your mind always having to consciously decide every single action, every single breath. It would be utterly overwhelming, wouldn't it? Our habits are like efficient little programs the brain runs in the background, freeing up our conscious attention for more complex thoughts and novel experiences. Indeed, a habit can be thought of as a recurring behavior that is triggered by a very specific cue and then reinforced by a reward. This creates what we often call the habit loop, a cycle consisting of a signal, a routine, and a reward. It's a beautifully simple yet incredibly powerful mechanism. This neurological dance, this loop, isn't just a theoretical construct, it's deeply rooted in the very structure of our brains. The basal ganglia, for instance, a cluster of structures deep within your brain, plays a central role in habit formation, in motor control, and in what we call procedural learning. Think of it as the quiet, tireless architect of your daily routines, working largely outside your conscious awareness. Within this intricate system, the striatum is particularly fascinating. It's a substructure of the basal ganglia, absolutely crucial for reinforcing habits. It's divided in a sense into two main parts, the dorsal striatum, which gently guides our habitual and automatic actions, and the ventral striatum, which includes the nucleus accumbens, a silent conductor in the grand symphony of reward processing and motivation. You see, these parts of the brain work in concert, carving out the pathways that allow us to navigate our days with a comforting degree of predictability. It's a profound testament to the brain's efficiency, really, always seeking to make our lives a little smoother, a little less effortful, even if we don't always notice its quiet endeavors. The habit triad cue. Now, as we ponder the depths of the brain's mysterious grooves, it's perhaps wise to consider the very nature of these ingrained patterns we call habits. For you see, habits are not merely behaviors we repeat. They are deeply etched designs upon the mind's grand tapestry, allowing us to navigate our daily lives with a quiet efficiency. Think of them as the mind's ingenious way of economizing energy. Every conscious decision we make requires effort but a habit. It is almost effortless, a well-worn path that our thoughts simply follow. So what truly defines a habit in the intricate architecture of our minds? It is, in essence, a repeated behavior triggered by a specific cue or signal and then reinforced by a reward. This forms what scholars often refer to as the habit loop, a continuous cycle of cue, routine, and reward. Each element plays its part, weaving together to create these automatic movements of our lives. The brain, in its vast wisdom, delegates these routine tasks to specific regions. Notably, the basal ganglia. This ancient part of our brain, nestled deep within, plays a central role in forming these habits, managing our motor control and facilitating what we call procedural learning. Imagine it as a silent, diligent librarian, categorizing and filing away all those repeated actions so that we scarcely need to consult the conscious mind when it's time to act. Within this region lies the striatum, a crucial substructure. It too divides its labor. The dorsal striatum handles our deeply ingrained, automatic actions, while the ventral striatum, which includes the nucleus accumbens, concerns itself with the processing of rewards and the subtle currents of motivation. Now the prefrontal cortex, that more analytical, decision-making part of our brain, is quite active at the beginning when a new behavior is being learned. It's the architect carefully planning each step, yet as a habit solidifies, its role diminishes, allowing the automatic mechanisms to take over. This shift is fascinating. It's as if the architect steps back once the building is complete, trusting its sturdy foundations. And supporting this grand dance of habit formation are other players, like the hippocampus, which provides the rich context for our habits, helping us to identify the subtle cues in our environment. Then there is the amygdala, processing our emotions, influencing which behaviors we tend to repeat, or, conversely, which ones we learn to avoid. It's a remarkable symphony of neural activity, quietly shaping the very fabric of our days. The habit triad routine. We have journeyed into the realm of the cue, that initial flicker, the whisper that awakens a habit. But a habit, you see, is never a solitary thing. It is a dance, a delicate interplay of three distinct partners. And while the cue is the invitation, the second and arguably most visible partner in this intricate ballet of behavior is the routine. Think of it as the dance itself, the actual steps we take once the music begins. The routine is the action, the specific behavior that unfolds after the cue has been perceived. If your cue is the time of day, perhaps the gentle glow of twilight when the workday ends, your routine might be reaching for a particular book, or perhaps for a comforting cup of tea. It is the doing, the active engagement with the world around us. What's fascinating about these routines is how effortlessly they can become ingrained. They transform from conscious decisions into almost automatic responses, freeing our minds for other contemplations. Now, you might be asking, what truly defines a routine within the grand tapestry of a habit? Well, it's the series of actions, mental or physical, that you engage in. It could be the physical act of lacing up your walking shoes the moment your alarm sounds, or the mental rehearsal of kindness before a difficult conversation. The brain, in its profound wisdom, seeks efficiency, and when a particular sequence of actions consistently follows a specific cue, it begins to carve a pathway, a neural shortcut, if you will. This shortcut allows the routine to execute with minimal conscious effort, almost as if on autopilot. This is why on certain days you might find yourself driving to your familiar workplace on a weekend, even when your intention was to visit a different locale. The cue of the car interior, the well-worn route, effortlessly triggers the ingrained routine. Perhaps you have observed this in your own life, these moments where your body seems to move independently of your explicit thought. This isn't some mystical occurrence. It is the culmination of countless repetitions, forging that strong, almost unbreakable link between the cue and the routine. These routines are not inherently good or bad, they are simply efficient sequences of behavior. The moral judgment we apply to them comes from their ultimate outcome, the reward which awaits us at the routine's conclusion. And it is to this final, essential partner in our habit triad, the mysterious and potent reward, that we shall turn our attention next. The habit triad reward. Now, as we venture deeper into this fascinating landscape of human behavior, let us consider the very fabric from which habits are woven, the routine. We've established that a routine is the action itself within the habit loop, the central performance, if you will, the observable step you take in response to a cue. Think back to our earlier discussion about the habit loop itself, the cue, the routine, and the reward. The routine is that doing part, the very heart of the habit. You see, when we speak of the routine, we are delving into the tangible, repeatable action that becomes etched into our neural pathways. It could be something as simple as turning off the light before you leave a room, or perhaps checking your phone the moment it vibrates. These are not grand, complex undertakings, but rather the small, often unconscious acts that collectively form the tapestry of our days. The brain, ever the efficient architect, seeks to automate these sequences, to move them from the realm of conscious decision to that of effortless execution. This conserves mental energy, you understand, freeing up our more deliberate thought processes for more demanding tasks. What's particularly intriguing is that the brain doesn't inherently distinguish between a good or a bad routine. For the brain, a repeated action is simply that, a pattern to be learned and rendered automatic. So whether one is developing the habit of a morning walk or perhaps habitually reaching for a sugary treat after a stressful meeting, the underlying neurological machinery operates in much the same way. The challenge, then, lies not in the brain's capacity for automation, but in our conscious discernment of which routines serve our deeper aspirations and which do not. Consider an athlete, perhaps, who diligently practices their form day after day. The routine of their training, the precise sequencing of movements, becomes so ingrained that it can be executed almost without conscious thought. This level of automaticity allows them to react swiftly and efficiently during competition, focusing their mental reserves on strategy rather than the mechanics of their sport. This is the profound power of a well-established routine. It frees the mind. Yet this very efficiency can also be our undoing. When a routine tied to an unhelpful outcome becomes deeply embedded, it can feel incredibly difficult to alter. It is as if the grooves in a worn path become so deep that deviating from them requires a significant, deliberate effort. But understanding this mechanism, that the routine is merely a response to a cue, seeking a reward, is the first whispered step towards rewriting its script. Silent triggers time. Indeed, in the grand tapestry of our daily existence, a significant portion of what we do, perhaps as much as 45%, are not conscious decisions unfolding in the moment, but rather the quiet, almost invisible threads of habit. Our minds, ever seeking efficiency, yearn to automate these actions, and here, in this quiet contemplation, we arrive at the heart of our exploration, the habit loop. It is a deceptively simple, yet profoundly powerful mechanism that underpins nearly everything we do. Imagine, if you will, a neurological ballet, a silent choreography within the brain. This ballet begins with what we call the cue. Think of it as a signal, a gentle tap on the shoulder from the world around us. This cue is the trigger that initiates the entire sequence. It could be something external, the setting sun, a notification chiming on a device, a reminder on a calendar. Or it might be something internal, perhaps a subtle feeling of weariness, a whisper of boredom, or the gentle rumble of hunger. Even the time of day itself can serve as a cue. The clock striking 3 in the afternoon, perhaps, bringing with it a yearning for that cup of coffee, or the alarm at 7 in the morning, signaling the start of a new day's routines. Once the cue has registered, the ballet continues with the routine. This is the action itself, the behavior we perform in response to that initial signal. It could be something as deliberate as a morning jog along a familiar path, or as unconscious as checking our phones during a conversation. Routines, you see, become the very definition of a habit. They can be wonderfully efficient, allowing us to navigate our days without having to consciously deliberate over every single step. Yet they can also be a quiet trap, leading us down paths of unproductive or even unhelpful behaviors, such as absently biting our nails without a second thought. The sheer repetition of these actions, the consistent pairing of the cue with the routine, slowly, steadily weaves a strong connection within the mind. And after the routine comes the reward. This is the satisfying culmination, the pleasant outcome that follows the completion of the behavior. The reward, perhaps a tangible treat or an intangible sense of accomplishment, is what signals to the brain that this particular routine, this particular way of responding to this particular cue, is something worth remembering. Something worth repeating. It might be the invigorating rush of cool air during a run, or the subtle sense of achievement after tidying an inbox. Indeed, the rewards might be quite subtle, a momentary relief from stress, a fleeting distraction from boredom. What is often most fascinating is how these underlying rewards, sometimes hidden even from ourselves, drive our behaviors, even those that might appear self-destructive. Understanding the reward element is crucial, for it allows us the possibility of changing the routine, while still preserving the very gratification the mind seeks. It is a subtle art, but one that can reshape the very fabric of our days. Silent triggers place. Cizas, odo jeden zenit bardziej niezwezelnich, a jednik zesni potsnich wizwalaxi nasich noikau. Cizas to niswiadomi to w lasni upluerci cizas, konkretna poradinia czy godzini, actu w nas sequinch zakuan, kator stali sijas druga natura. Wyabresmi sobi porinik signalum du pirusij koi mas bike nitilko sam moment pr zebidzinia, il rex tasicha, powdars on la sequencha swidu, ti same promini slanka padajesna podlog. I nagel bez zbite niegos astenuinia, nas silo jaz nimal automatics ni kiruj si w stron kuchni, by zaparzik 10 rozgazut si napaj. To w lasni jest 10 sichi shept sizasu, katori stage si w stepum dunasid pornaj rutini. Podobni jest z wiloma inimi seasonisiami. Punapor obiato, katora nikjudnoik sigania po konkretni pr zakaski. Amos 10 moment, gdy zegar wybaja piet nesta. To jaznimal signal du malaj pr zerwi I chigo sladkiego. Kosiko mozg nai osadza, siziwaiti noiki sadiele nas dober, siziwai zili. On po prostu kajar z okresleni sizas z okreslanem dizilanem, iotruala to polixeni w swich neuronalnich sizkich. Tudas tikwai jednak nizwikla mok, swayadamusk. Gdy zirs umami, z sizas maz bike tak silnum wiswalaxum, ziskujami mazliwask subtil nego piarzeker wania jigo energia. Maz mi noxic sizastapawak ti stare, maz emnie pozidane noiki, noemi, bardzie w spierdisami. Jesli na piarziklet zoazemi, z pietnesta wiswala w nuz pragnini kukru, maz mi sprabwak w tim samim moments swayadomi signek poshklank wodi lub zerobik kilkag glebkich audichow. To w lasni tak, malami, pozorni niznik sesami zimayanami, zaxanami piarzepsuak scenarius na zigo kadzinigo zaisha. To nixim drobni lex precisni ruch w skomplikawnj masani, katori z cizasum ziminia kali jej mechanism. To wazni by pamiatak zt neuronalni siski formuja si piarzes powdars elnosk. Kaz taki powdars any jest nixim shaniak kanitka w pleshana w wilki goblin nasich zakwan. I am wisidnisi, tim mokni ac I tirwalsi w zor. El 10 prox y maga surpliwaska. Nigest to questia kulku dni, lex sizesto wilu tigodni, a not misesi, zanim no polixeni staini sinutile silni, by dizilek automaticsni. To prox paulnigo diludoania, ni gwaltuned zimiani. IW tim w lasni tiquai jigo sila I jigo pikno. Sizas katori wiswala, mostak sironi sizasum, katori lexi I bujuj. Silent triggers emotion. Our explorations thus far have woven a tapestry of understanding around the intricate dance of habit formation within the quiet chambers of our minds. We've considered the silent triggers that beckon these automatic behaviors into being, focusing on the subtle yet powerful influence of the places we inhabit. Now our gentle journey carries us onward to another powerful yet often overlooked category of these quiet instigators, other people. Indeed, our habits are rarely formed or maintained in a vacuum. We are social creatures, and the echoes of those around us, their routines, their expectations, and their very presence can act as potent cues for our own actions. Imagine, if you will, the simple act of having a cup of tea. For some, the mere sight of a colleague brewing their morning chai becomes an almost irresistible signal to do the same. Or perhaps the familiar ritual of friends gathering for a weekly game night. Their collective presence becomes the cue for late hours and perhaps a few too many sugary snacks. This phenomenon, you see, is deeply rooted in our innate desire for connection and conformity. Our brains are exquisitely wired to observe, learn from, and often mirror the behavior of those in our social sphere. When we perceive that certain actions are common or expected within our group, those actions are more likely to become etched into our own neural pathways as habits. It is less about conscious choice and more about a subtle, almost osmotic, absorption of behaviors from our environment. Consider the impact of shared experiences. Perhaps you began a morning walk not because of an internal drive, but because your partner suggested it. Over time, that shared ritual, the rhythm of walking together, the quiet camaraderie, becomes the very cue for the habit itself. Or on the other side of the coin, a group of friends who habitually gather for a boisterous evening might find that the very act of their meeting, regardless of individual inclination, becomes a strong trigger for certain behaviors, be they beneficial or otherwise. What this means is the people we choose to spend our time with, consciously or unconsciously, are constantly broadcasting a symphony of cues that shape our daily lives. Silent triggers others. Indeed, shaping our environment can sometimes be the gentlest yet most profound way to guide our actions. Think of it this way: our minds are often like rivers flowing along the paths of least resistance. If we can subtly reshape the riverbeds, the water will follow a new course quite naturally, with far less effort than trying to force it upstream. You see, when we embark upon the journey of forming new habits, it's not simply a matter of sheer willpower. No, if only it were that straightforward. Our brains, those marvelous, intricate instruments, are designed for efficiency. They love to automate, and once a path is worn smooth, once a behavior becomes a habit, the brain prefers to follow it, regardless of whether that habit serves us well or poorly. Now, you might recall the popular notion that a habit forms in a mere 21 days, a comforting thought perhaps, but alas, not quite accurate. Research, the kind that peers deeply into the quiet mechanics of our minds, suggests a much broader timeline, from 18 days up to more than 8 months, with a common average resting closer to 66 days. It depends, as most things do, on the complexity of the behavior and the simple constancy of our efforts. This isn't a race with a strict finish line. It's more like tending a garden where some seeds sprout quickly and others take their own sweet time. What this means is that patience becomes a virtue, a steady hand in the face of what might feel like slow progress. Our brains are not always quick to distinguish between a good habit and a bad one. They simply record the patterns we repeat. And because these patterns become etched into our neural pathways, they can lie dormant, only to be awakened by a familiar cue or the promise of a fleeting reward. An old habit once learned never truly vanishes, it merely awaits its moment to resurface. So as we consider crafting our habits, it becomes less about brute force and more about subtle design. We are not just changing isolated actions, we are in a very real sense gently reprogramming a part of ourselves. And that, my friends, is a task worthy of thoughtful consideration. Crafting your habits. Our minds, you see, are intricate tapestries, woven with countless threads of habit, some obvious, some hidden in the twilight of our subconscious. We've spoken of external triggers, those gentle nudges from the world around us. But often the most potent triggers are those arising from within, silent signals that set our routines in motion without a single spoken word or visible event. Imagine, if you will, the deep, quiet hum of your own inner landscape. These are the internal triggers, your emotions, your thoughts, your very sensations. They are the feelings of boredom that lead to aimless scrolling, or the subtle pang of anxiety that prompts a habitual reach for a comforting snack. These are not external cues, but rather the echoes of our own internal states, subtly guiding our actions. What is particularly interesting is how these internal states can become so deeply intertwined with our habitual responses. It's almost as if our mind creates these little shortcuts, these automatic pathways, to navigate the complexities of our feelings and thoughts. When boredom whispers, the hand reaches. When stress tightens its grip, a familiar habit offers a momentary, if fleeting, solace. Now, here's where it truly becomes a dance between our inner and outer worlds. These internal triggers, while born within, can often seek external routines to find their reward. A feeling of loneliness, for instance, might be the silent trigger for opening a social media application, seeking connection, or at least the momentary illusion of it. Or perhaps a burgeoning creative urge, a thought of an idea, becomes the trigger to habitually open a notebook, even if the words don't flow immediately. The crucial point here is that the initial impulse, the starting gun for the habit, fires from within. You might be wondering, how do these internal states gain such power over our actions? Well, our brains, in their infinite wisdom, are designed to conserve energy. Conscious decision-making is effortful, a grand production every time. Habits, whether good or less helpful, are the brain's way of automating frequently performed behaviors. They become efficient, almost unconscious scripts. So when an internal state, like stress or pleasure, is consistently followed by a particular action, and that action provides a perceived reward, the brain learns this association. It carves a deeper groove in the neural pathways, making the internal trigger-action connection stronger and more automatic with each repetition. So the next time that particular internal state arises, the associated habit is ready, almost eager to be performed. Consider the gentle ripple it creates in the grand tapestry of our daily existence. Understanding these internal triggers is not about judgment, but about thoughtful observation of the subtle currents that guide our actions. It allows us to perceive those silent signals before they culminate in a fully formed, perhaps unintended, routine, granting us a quiet moment of choice before the automatic sequence takes over. Gentle habit shaping. Last time we delved into the very architecture of habit formation, how our brains quite literally wire themselves to automate our actions. We saw that a habit is essentially a blueprint. A well-worn path in the mind that once laid is remarkably efficient, but a question often arises. If habits are so ingrained, so automatic, does that leave us without agency? Are we simply creatures of these well-worn paths, unable to choose a different route once it's been established? And perhaps more importantly, how do we begin to craft habits that truly serve us, that elevate our lives rather than detract from them? You see, it's not enough to simply understand how a habit forms. The true mastery lies in the gentle art of shaping these automatic patterns, to bend them to our will, to ensure they are allies in our pursuit of a more peaceful and fulfilling existence. It's about working with our nature, not against it. We know now that habits operate on a loop, a signal, a routine, and a reward, and often our focus instinctively falls on the routine itself, doesn't it? We lament the act we wish to change, or the new act we struggle to begin. Yet here's a subtle truth that often goes overlooked. The starting pistol for any habit is the cue, that quiet, often unnoticed trigger that sets the whole sequence in motion. Imagine, if you will, the gentle flow of a river. The river itself is the routine, the current carrying you along, but what determines its course, its beginning, its direction? It's the landscape, the subtle inclines, the small tributaries that feed into it. These are our cues. These seemingly insignificant factors in our environment, or our inner world truly chart the course of our days. Now, recognizing these cues, this is where our gentle influence can begin. It's not about brute force, you understand. It's about observation, about a quiet study of the currents that shape our lives, and what we find if we observe closely are often 5 distinct types of triggers that ignite our habits, not demanding commands, but subtle whispers that nudge us one way or another. Perhaps it's the simple ticking of time, the arrival of a certain hour that, for better or worse, prompts a particular action. Or perhaps it is a specific location, a room, a chair, a vista from a window, or indeed it could be a preceding event, an action you've just completed, or even a particular emotional state that settles upon you. Then too, there are the quiet influences of other people, those around us whose presence can often, quite unconsciously, steer our actions. Consider the simple act of preparing for slumber. For some, the mere twilight descending, the clock striking a certain hour, this temporal cue, signals the beginning of a wind-down routine. For others, it might be the act of entering the bedroom itself, a location cue. Perhaps it's the last chapter of a book, a preceding event that tells the mind it's time. Even a feeling of peace or perhaps weary contentment can be an emotional cue. And of course, the quiet presence of a loved one can influence these end-of-day rituals. You see, these cues are everywhere once you begin to notice them. The power of small. Having navigated the gentle art of shaping new habits, our journey now takes a turn towards a perhaps more challenging landscape, dismantling those unwanted patterns that no longer serve us. You see, the very mechanisms that lead to habits formation, its cues, its routines, and its rewards, are precisely what we must understand, and then strategically disrupt to break its hold. Think of the brain not as a simple machine, but as a vast, ancient tapestry, rich with threads woven over years. Each thread represents a neural pathway, and the strongest, most vibrant threads are those habits we've practiced endlessly. These habits, whether beneficial or detrimental, become deeply ingrained, almost like automatic behavioral blueprints that the mind follows without conscious thought. And our brain, in its infinite wisdom, loves this efficiency because it conserves precious mental energy. It doesn't inherently distinguish between a good habit and a bad one. It simply automates, much like a skilled craftsman automates familiar movements to conserve effort. This is why about half of our daily actions, perhaps even more, are autopilot behaviors. Breaking an unwanted habit isn't about eradicating that thread from the tapestry entirely. Perchance it's closer to loosening its weave, fading its colors, and weaving new, brighter threads around it. The original pathway always remains, waiting for the right conditions to be reactivated, like an old riverbed that can once again carry water during a heavy rain. This is important to remember, for it brings a measure of compassion to the often frustrating process of change. We are not flawed for having old habits, it is simply how our brains are wired to learn and to conserve. Consider the habit loop once more, the cue, the routine, and the reward. To effectively sever a habit, we must address each of these components. First, we might seek to change the cue, the trigger that sets the routine in motion. Perhaps it's a specific time of day, a particular place, an emotion, or even the presence of certain people. If you always reach for a sugary snack at precisely 3 in the afternoon, the clock itself has become a cue. By altering this trigger, perhaps by scheduling a walk at that time, or simply removing the snack from sight, you begin to weaken the connection. It's about designing your environment gently so that the old cue loses its power. Then, there is the routine itself. This is the behavior we wish to change. Instead of trying to simply stop the unwanted action, which often proves difficult as the brain still craves the reward, we can try to substitute it with a different routine. The key here is not to fight the craving but to redirect it. If a moment of stress typically leads to unhealthy coping mechanisms, an alternative routine could be a few deep breaths, a short walk, or a moment of reflection. The idea remains to fulfill the underlying need that the old routine addressed, but through a healthier, more conscious action. You might be wondering, what is that underlying need? Often it's something surprisingly simple, like a brief distraction, a momentary relief, or a sense of control. Finally, we must subtly recalibrate the reward. The reward, of course, is the outcome that satisfies the craving and reinforces the habit. When breaking a habit, the original reward can be quite potent. The brain needs a new reason, a new satisfaction, to embrace the replacement routine. This might mean finding a healthier reward that fulfills a similar desire, or simply appreciating the intrinsic benefits of the new behavior. If the unwanted habit offered comfort, for instance, the new routine should also offer a form of comfort, perhaps a more enduring one. It's a delicate dance, this re-education of the reward system, and it is this quiet, persistent work that allows us to gently unravel the old, unwanted loops and begin to weave our tapestry anew. Breaking unwanted loops. The intricate dance of our daily lives, you see, is largely choreographed not by conscious decision, but by the quiet whispers of habit. These automatic routines, deeply ingrained within us, serve a fascinating purpose. They reduce the cognitive load upon our minds, allowing us to navigate the world without constantly expending precious mental energy on every single action. Think of it like a seasoned musician playing a complex piece. The notes flow with an effortless grace, no longer requiring the strenuous, deliberate thought of a beginner. Now, habits themselves are woven from a particular kind of thread, a neurological pattern known as the habit loop. This loop, a concept championed by the likes of Charles Duhigg, consists of three essential components: the cue, the routine, and the reward. The cue, or signal, is the trigger, a specific stimulus that tells our brain to initiate a particular behavior. This could be anything from the changing light of dusk prompting you to reach for a book, to the persistent notification on a digital device. Then comes the routine, the behavior itself. It is the very action we wish to either reinforce or perhaps alter. And finally, the reward, the positive outcome or the satisfying feeling that follows the routine, signaling to our brain that this particular sequence is indeed worth remembering, worth repeating. What's particularly interesting about this loop is how it functions within the very architecture of our brain. The basal ganglia, for instance, a small but mighty collection of structures nestled deep within the forebrain, plays a central role in habit formation. And within the basal ganglia, the striatum is crucial for strengthening these learned behaviors. You see, the brain isn't necessarily concerned with whether a habit is good or bad in a moral sense, it simply seeks efficiency. If a behavior and context association has been repeated and a reward has followed, the brain begins to etch that pathway more deeply. This is neuroplasticity at work. The brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself, constantly strengthening the neural connections that are used frequently. It's a testament, perhaps, to the profound influence of repetition upon our very being, slowly shaping who we become, one small, automatic action at a time. Replacing old patterns. The brain, in its profound wisdom, doesn't distinguish between what we label good or bad habits. To its intricate mechanisms, a habit is simply an automated sequence of behavior, a pattern etched into its pathways. This, you see, is why breaking an unwanted loop, a habit that no longer serves us, can feel like such a formidable task. It's akin to trying to reroute a well-worn river. The water naturally wants to follow the path of least resistance. Indeed, our minds are wired to conserve energy. Conscious thought, deliberation, decision-making, these are energy-intensive processes. Habits, then, are the brain's elegant solution to this challenge. They are shortcuts, pathways that allow us to navigate much of our day without constant, deliberate effort. Consider this: roughly half of our daily actions are habitual. Imagine, if you will, the sheer mental exhaustion if each of those actions required a conscious choice. We would be utterly overwhelmed. So when we seek to break an unwanted habit, we aren't simply willing it away. We are, in essence, attempting to reprogram a deeply ingrained system. The cue, that initial trigger we spoke of earlier, and the reward, the satisfying outcome, create a powerful connection that bypasses much of our conscious thought. When that cue appears, the brain is already anticipating the routine and the subsequent reward. It's a prediction machine, constantly seeking efficiency. Now, here's where the challenge truly lies. The brain isn't inherently interested in whether a habit makes us happy or healthy in the long run. Its primary directive in this context is to repeat what has led to a reward in the past. This is why a momentary pleasure, a fleeting sense of relief, can outweigh the long-term consequences of an undesirable habit. It's a very ancient mechanism designed for immediate survival, a swift response to a trigger rather than a careful deliberation of future outcomes. The act of breaking a habit, then, isn't about eradicating it entirely. The neurological pathways are already there, etched like ancient runes in the brain's vast archives. It's more about building new, stronger pathways, diverting the river, if you will. This requires a different kind of effort, one that initially feels far more arduous than simply following the old, well-trodden path. It is a mindful disruption of an automatic response. Mindful disengagement. Indeed, as we continue our journey into the quiet architecture of our minds, the concept of replacing old patterns takes us to a deeper understanding. We've spoken of identifying the cues, those subtle signals that initiate a habit, whether it be the twilight dimming, prompting one to reach for a book, or another, less desirable, impulse. Now here's what's intriguing. Your mind, in its tireless work to conserve energy, does not inherently distinguish between a good habit and a bad one. It simply observes repetition, and then, with quiet efficiency, it automates that behavior. Think of it like an old archivist meticulously filing away every action into its proper place. The more often a certain action follows a certain trigger, the more deeply etched that path becomes within the grand library of your brain. You might be wondering, how long does it truly take for such a path to be worn smooth and deep? The popular notion often speaks of a mere 21 days, a rather appealingly swift timeline. Yet the scholarly echoes from the archives tell a more nuanced story. Research compiled from thoughtful studies suggests that the journey to establishing a new habit can span anywhere from 18 days to a more winding 254 days. On average, you see, it settles around 66 days for a behavior to truly become automatic. This considerable variance is deeply personal, influenced by the complexity of the new endeavor and the individual's own unique tapestry of mind and circumstance. This is important because understanding this timeline can temper our expectations. The initial enthusiasm, that burst of dopamine when we first embark on a new routine, can wane if the expected reward isn't immediate or as potent as anticipated. Imagine, if you will, tending a nascent garden. One does not plant a seed and expect a tree to sprout by the morning. It requires patient watering, careful tending, and an understanding of the natural rhythm of growth. If the gardener expects a swift canopy, disappointment is sure to follow, and the motivation to continue may well wither. So if the actual reward, the tangible change or feeling, falls short of our often optimistic predictions, the steady release of dopamine can falter. This can lead to what some call limbic friction, a subtle resistance that makes embarking on a new, unfamiliar activity feel disproportionately arduous. Your mind, accustomed to the well-trodden paths, senses this friction, and in its wisdom, often nudges you back toward behaviors that require less conscious effort. Those deeply coded habits that demand little of your precious mental energy. The mind, in its essence, seeks efficiency. Old habits are comfortable because they are efficient. They are the well-worn grooves in the vinyl record of our lives, played almost effortlessly. To replace these requires a gentle re-education, a patient guiding of the needle to a new, perhaps initially scratchy track. It is a slow, deliberate dance with our own mental architecture, a dance that asks for understanding rather than brute force. We are not merely breaking old habits. We are, in a very real sense, patiently etching new ones. Sleep and habit. Our minds are truly remarkable, capable of crafting routines that guide a significant portion of our daily existence. Studies suggest that nearly half of our daily actions, perhaps 45% or even more, are driven by these unconscious patterns rather than by conscious decisions. You see, the brain is quite an efficient organ, prefers to conserve energy where it can, and automating behaviors, turning them into habits, is a brilliant way it achieves this. This means we're not constantly having to think about every small thing we do, which frees up our cognitive resources for more complex thoughts and considerations. The very essence of a habit, from a neurological perspective, is a pattern of behavior that becomes automatic, minimizing the need for our conscious effort. It's a well-learned sequence triggered by specific cues and often reinforced by a sense of reward. Think of it as a neurological shortcut, if you will, a well-worn path in the intricate landscape of our minds that we traverse without much thought. What's particularly fascinating about this process is how these neural pathways are actually formed. When we repeat a behavior in a consistent context, our brains begin to link the cue, that trigger, directly to the behavior itself. This isn't just a fleeting connection, it's a strengthening of the neural circuits in what's called the dorsolateral striatum, a region of the brain intimately involved in habit formation. And the deeper the grooves of that pathway become, the more automatic the behavior feels. Dopamine, that remarkable chemical messenger of pleasure and reward, plays a crucial role in reinforcing these connections. When a behavior leads to a positive outcome or satisfies a craving, dopamine is released, essentially telling our brain, yes, this is good, remember this, do it again. It's this internal reward system that solidifies the habit, embedding it into our neurological architecture. And what makes this so important for our understanding is that these same fundamental mechanisms, the cues, the routines, the rewards, and the strengthening of neural pathways, govern both what we might call good habits and those we perceive as bad ones. The brain, in its elegant efficiency, doesn't inherently distinguish between them. It simply automates what is repeated. Morning's gentle embrace. Now we've spoken of habits, how they form, how they persist, but there is a subtler, perhaps more profound aspect to consider. Many of our daily actions, you see, are not born of conscious deliberation, but rather from these deep-seated routines. Some scholars suggest that close to half of what we do each day is driven by habit. It's a rather sobering thought, isn't it, that so much of our waking life operates on a kind of autopilot. This automaticity, while efficient for the brain, also presents a fascinating challenge when we wish to change course. You might imagine that a habit once formed is etched like an ancient inscription into the very fabric of our minds. Indeed, the brain does not distinguish between a good habit and a bad one. It simply registers a repeated sequence, a neural pathway strengthened by consistent use. It's like a well-worn path in a forest, easy to follow, not because it's the best way, but because it's the most familiar. And often, these paths lead us away from what we truly intend. Here's what's interesting. While we might possess a strong desire, a clear intention to alter our actions, to exercise more, to perhaps read more, or to avoid a particular indulgence, these intentions alone are often insufficient. The sheer force of our ingrained habits can overwhelm even the most earnest resolution. Think of it as a river. You can build a small dam with effort, but the current of established habit is powerful, ceaselessly pushing against your new construction. Real change requires more than just a fleeting act of will. It demands a more deliberate, architectural approach to the riverbed itself. Consider the concept of limbic friction. This is the internal resistance, the mental inertia that arises when we contemplate a new or challenging action. Starting something novel, something outside our habitual patterns, often feels heavy. It requires a burst of mental energy, a push against the comfortable current of what usually happens. This friction is a significant hurdle. It's why, when we are tired or stressed, we so readily fall back into old patterns, even if we know they aren't serving us well. Brain, in its wisdom, or perhaps its laziness, seeks the path of least resistance. It conserves energy by leaning on the familiar, the automatic. Recognizing this friction allows us to approach habit change with a greater sense of compassion for ourselves. It's not a failure of character, you see, but a natural inclination of the mind. And once we understand its mechanics, we can begin to devise strategies to lessen this friction, to smooth the path for the habits we truly wish to cultivate. This often means breaking down our desired actions into such small, manageable steps that the limbic friction hardly registers. It's the difference between trying to move a boulder and simply picking up a pebble. Evening's quiet rituals. The brain, this marvelous, intricate organ, is designed, you see, to conserve energy. It is constantly seeking efficiencies, and in this pursuit, habits are incredibly useful. They allow us to navigate much of our day without expending conscious thought. Indeed, studies suggest that nearly half of what we do each day is habitual. Now, you might be asking, how precisely does the brain manage this remarkable feat of automation? It all begins within the deeper structures of our gray matter, a fascinating region known as the basal ganglia. This ancient part of the brain is not concerned with conscious decisions, but rather with the quiet, persistent work of motor control and procedural learning. Think of it as the brain's archivist, meticulously cataloging repeated actions. Within the basal ganglia lies the striatum, a key player in this neurological ballet. The striatum itself has two primary divisions: the dorsal striatum, which patiently shapes our habitual, automatic actions, and the ventral striatum, which includes a small, vital area called the nucleus accumbens, deeply involved in how we process rewards and motivation. This is where the subtle interplay of anticipation and satisfaction truly begins to weave the fabric of our habits. At the outset of any new behavior, the prefrontal cortex, our center for decision-making and goal-oriented actions, is quite active. It is mapping out the intention, weighing the outcomes. But as we repeat a behavior, this conscious effort slowly fades. The prefrontal cortex recedes, its role diminishing as the basal ganglia takes the reins, automating the sequence. It is as if the brain is saying, "Ah, yes, we've done this before, I shall commit it to memory." The hippocampus, you see, provides the rich tapestry of context. It helps us discern the precise cues that trigger a habit. It is why a particular scent or the twilight glow of evening might effortlessly usher in a familiar routine. And then there is the amygdala, our emotional sentinel. It processes the feelings associated with our actions, either reinforcing them with a gentle sense of contentment or deterring them with a whisper of unease. These emotional echoes, too, play their part in strengthening or weakening the unconscious patterns we form. Habits for serenity. Pamiętać zmysł uwielbia oxydzek energy. To jigo naturalna tendencja. Wybres sobi, ziazuas computera, on za każdym razem, gdy wyknujesty sama sezonosk, probija z automatyzoek, zapisek w pamięci chemiak samedzilny, biodsiazik prosser. Nas mozg dizila podobny, kopikni widek na piarzykledzi zwajo podstoi gleboko osadzonich struktur. Pelniesich klux o rol w tej automatyzacki. To w lasny tam, w tej sichid sizeskai nasid biologia, formuja siti bezwidni, rutino dizilania. Praskoi kator jest podstructure zwajo podstoi, dizila jak centrum doadzenia. Modwy glon sizeskai, praskui zibaito, odpodzielni za dizilania noikawai automaticsni oras praskui biarzusni, zijadrum polizasum, kator jest kluxo dla piarzet warznia nagrad I moduakci. widzis to skomplikauni, ale nizwikal eleganki mechanism. Napoxiku kidiuxami psychigos no ego, bardzo actuna gest cor pr zegsiloa, to gest tasizesk mazgu, ke torad payada za swiadom desizj izakoania ukarunkoen nasel. Il im bardzie dane zakwani sayatwala, im sizesiegi powdarzemi, tim emniesa roll odgru a cor pr zegsiloa, a control pr zemuja tw lasni automatics ni systemi, hip kempnatomiast, de nasum noicum context, pazwalanam raspasnak signali, ke tordad apoxitek dame wazakoeniu. Pomisalonim jako nasim wunidisnim archwisi, ke tori pr zipamina, kidi ajadizi dani noik jestnid bardzier od poidni, I ressi. Silo migdaloi to ono pr zetwars anas imoksh, wz maknia lub zinaicheka dupautarzinia punich d zylan. Papazes skajarzinia mokchanelni, kidi sizujami si w jaki spasab nagardzeni jest ono silnie actuine komoi mozgui, tak to jest dober powdors tu. W shiskiti subtelni wunidisni mechanismi, pracuja razum a binas zysi bilopliniae bardzies automatizoin. Pozwalajanam nutu bizminai musili swidomi misleko kazdem kroku kazded drobna desizji, to tak jack bczesk nuz. Bila w sias zajadaklidanum shuffla w nasij wunidisnij bibliotes, bizmi mogli swabadnie, bez wiselku. Porsek sipo mindrech dinia kadzinigo, diziki tamu not kidi zasapiemi, Naz zamisal w sias pracuj utralejekti nizlikson siski, ke torul wiajanam zaisi. Long-term calm. Indeed, in our last conversation we considered the gentle art of cultivating serenity through habit. Now we turn our gaze inward again to the intricate dance of persistence and consistency, those quiet forces that weave a new behavior into the very fabric of our being. You see, the mind, in its profound wisdom, seeks efficiency above all else. It desires to automate, to make routine, any action that is repeated. For in automation it finds a resting place, conserving its precious energy. It matters not to the grand orchestrator that is your brain whether a habit serves you or hinders you. If you repeat it, it will endeavor to make it automatic. This is why mere intention or a sudden burst of willpower often proves fleeting. When we embark upon a new path with noble aspirations to alter our ways, we meet with what some scholars call limbic friction. This is the inherent resistance the brain offers to anything new, anything that demands conscious effort and diverts from its preferred, well-worn grooves. Imagine, if you will, a river carving its path. At first the water might meander, seeking the easiest course, but over time, through countless repetitions, it deepens its bed, a channel forms, and the river flows with an effortless, persistent grace. Changing a habit is much like redirecting such a river. It requires a sustained, deliberate effort to carve a new channel, to guide the flow of thought and action into an unfamiliar course. What's particularly intriguing is that the brain rewards this persistence. When you undertake a new behavior and that behavior eventually yields a positive outcome, a subtle chemical message is sent. Dopamine, often called the brain's reward molecule, is released. This release tells the brain, quite simply, this is good, repeat this. It is a profound, unconscious learning process, yet the initial stages are often devoid of immediate, tangible rewards for the conscious mind. For instance, the gentle act of a morning stretch may not instantly bestow upon you the vigor of youth. So the brain's expectation of reward, if not met in the immediate, can lead to a diminishment in this motivating dopamine signal. One might begin a new habit with fervent hope, but if the perceived reward is less than anticipated, the enthusiasm can wane, much like a flickering candle in a draft. This is why consistency, even when the immediate gratification is absent, is the quiet architect of enduring change. It is not about grand gestures, but the patient, day-by-day turning of an old leaf, until in the fullness of time, a new chapter is written. The art of persistence. Indeed, these mechanisms of habit extend far beyond simple routines. They delve into the very core of our neurological landscape. You see, the fascinating truth is that whether we're talking about a beneficial habit, something like taking a morning stroll, or a less helpful one, say perhaps mindlessly reaching for a sweet treat after dinner, the brain often operates on the same fundamental principles. It doesn't inherently distinguish between what we label good or bad. It simply seeks to automate what is repeated. Now you might be wondering, why is this automation so persistent? What makes these patterns so deeply ingrained? Think of it this way: the brain is quite an efficient machine, always looking for ways to conserve energy. When a behavior is performed repeatedly in a consistent context, the brain begins to lay down neural pathways, like worn-out paths leading through a forest. Over time, these paths become so well-trodden, so familiar, that traversing them requires very little conscious effort. It becomes almost a reflex. What this means is that a significant portion of our waking hours, some researchers suggest as much as 45 to 70% of our daily actions, are governed by these automatic patterns, these habits. They allow us to navigate our day without having to consciously decide every single action, from brushing our teeth to driving a familiar route. Without this unconscious automation, our minds would be utterly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of decisions required. But here's the subtle challenge. The brain's primary objective is not necessarily to cultivate our highest aspirations, but to maintain this efficiency. It builds strong neural connections based on what we actually do, not always on what we intend to do. This is why mere intention, that quiet resolve to change, is often insufficient. It's why we might find ourselves repeating old patterns even when our conscious mind wishes otherwise. The neural pathways are simply too robust, too well established. They tug at our actions, almost imperceptibly. This intricate dance between conscious intention and subconscious habit reveals a profound truth about our nature. It suggests that while our free will is undoubtedly powerful, it operates within a framework of neurological predispositions. Understanding this underlying mechanism is the very first step toward gently reshaping those deeply etched patterns. Your habit sanctuary. Pamięta drogi slaczaksu zinatura ludzka, najgest monolitem. Każdy z nas jest niczym arzeka, plajnaka w lasna siska, kształtuj si kradbrez wakol cbw unikelny sposób. Zatem, sizas podazebni na uformoninojku, to najgest stala, nizmina lixba, ars ukana w eder bez reflexji. Chok popularn pr zekanini o dwadzstu jeden dinajach. Zakorzanilo si gleboko w swiadamaskaj, badania naka ukazuja zinaxni shursi, duzo bardzie ziniuenswini obras, wyabrez mi sobi experiment. WK torem uxisnisi starali si W prawadzik W swoj no, z drow zakoania. Jedni postanoli pik wisad wodi, in ni regularni si cute wixik, jesks in ni debako z drow sa diet. Kosiko ten sizas na uformoni noiku wahol si zinexako. Ad zalad wisi zitert dni, dutiar zidzistu paisu dni. De Cherokee Spectrum Prada, a mediana, sizili taward oskasacute rodkoa, usadowilla siji dizis pomidzi pikzisioma diziwisioma sheskzisioma shesioma diniami. Kota mowi namo ludskim doswiaksiniu, atas sirpliwask, jest sinota, azirzumiani individualnej zemian oska. Kluxum du successu, najmajid nigo universal nigo kalendars adla w shiskich noikau idla w shiskich ludzi. Zalzi to ad wilu subtilnich niuenso, ad sizestetli waskai, zi jakadena sizinosk jest paudarzana, ad jedlet waskai ad satisfacti jakazinie chirpami attacks. Ad tigo, jak dabas ten noi noik w spalgr zi kala nasa zisio orchestra. Siziwai pasu duna zigo ritmu, du nasich kodzinich paunoskai, duna zigo temperamentu. Widzis, oxycuni, zi kazdi zinas bedzi w staini przek stalsik swoj kodzian zakoania w magixni 21 dni. Maz prawadzik jedini du frustrek pixusha poreski. A ti nistadi saragami tirwalad zimayani. Zamiast tigo pawanismi pachadzik du tigo zixluasikawasia. Nixim archivista pr zegladad si ster documenti, weedzek zi kazda karta. Ma swoja w lasna history swad w lasni sizasna eugenini w shiskich shegalo. No noiki wymagaja mieska du rozquitu, nixim delikatni pedi w agradzi. Sizest liwaskik pilignakji, latwask dostapu du narzedzi. Zadowolny plinus z observania ik w zirastu. W shisko to w spalgra bujajak ik sil, to nigest sprint lex raxage, powolny spacer przes alleged doswiegsen, jdizi kazdi krok, not nedniasi, ma swoj zinaxeni. Rusting into change. Our journey through the psychology of habits has been a long and winding one, much like a river carving its path through the ancient earth. We've delved into the quiet depths of why we do what we do, uncovering the hidden mechanisms that shape our days from the smallest gesture to the grandest aspiration. We began by understanding that habits aren't merely repetitive actions. They are deeply etched neural pathways carved into the very structure of our brains. They are our mind's elegant solution to efficiency, a way to conserve precious mental energy by automating tasks. Think of it as a silent librarian, meticulously organizing our actions so we don't have to consciously consult the archives for every single move. This mechanism, powered by the ingenious habit loop of cue, routine, and reward, explains why so much of our daily lives unfolds beyond conscious thought. The cue acts as a gentle nudge, the routine is the action itself, and the reward, that's the brain's silent affirmation whispering, "This is worth repeating." We explored the fascinating dance of dopamine, not just as the chemical of pleasure, but as the messenger of motivation, guiding our learning. It's what signals to our brain that a certain action is beneficial, that it should be reinforced. We learned that the power of repetition, coupled with the subtle chemical reward, builds and stabilizes these neuronal connections, turning conscious effort into automatic inclination. Yet we've also acknowledged the inherent challenge within this elegant system. Our brains, in their quest for efficiency, don't distinguish between good habits and bad ones. A comforting evening stroll and a late-night snack in front of the television are, to the brain, simply patterns to be reinforced. This is why breaking deeply ingrained habits can feel like diverting a river from its ancient course. It requires intention, patience, and a slight shift in the landscape. We've considered how subtly altering the cue, replacing the routine, or even reimagining the reward can help us reshape these automatic patterns. Ultimately, understanding the psychology of habits is not about rigidly controlling our lives, but about gaining a gentle mastery over them. It's about recognizing the profound influence these automated behaviors wield and perhaps learning to sculpt them with a bit more intention. It allows us to view our own actions, and indeed the actions of others, through a more compassionate lens, understanding that much of what drives us is a silent, often unconscious, seeking of comfort, efficiency, or reward. The lessons from these quiet studies suggest that lasting change often comes not from brute force or sheer willpower, but from small, consistent adjustments, patiently applied, until the new path becomes the natural one. It's a testament to the quiet power of consistency and the remarkable adaptability of the human mind. And so this brings us to the gentle close of our discussion on the psychology of habits. I hope our time together has offered you some quiet insights into the intricate workings of your own mind, a deeper appreciation for the silent forces that shape our days, and perhaps a renewed sense of possibility for intentional change. This realm of understanding, like so many others, is a vast, ancient tapestry, always inviting further exploration. If you found this series to be a comforting companion, I would be most grateful if you considered subscribing to the channel. A gentle thumbs up on this video also helps these quiet lessons find their way to others seeking a moment of peace and understanding. Do explore the other narratives within Bedtime Lessons. There are many more stories to be whispered into the twilight. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Sweet dreams.